Hi everyone, this is Dr. Rankin. Another short video for you on chapters 1 through 3, which equate to the proposal. Now these short videos are really designed to wet your whistle and get you ready for the live session. So you can start thinking about these concepts and develop any questions that you might have so that when we talk about it live, you'll know what it is that you've thought about it. Now chapters 1, 2, and 3 represent the introduction, the literature review, chapter 2, and then the methodology, chapter 3. Chapter 1 is really, well, we'll go into that in just a moment. In general, though, you should remember or should know that chapters 1 and 3 will contain methodology. That will be in future tense because it's what you are going to do in the future. The more complete that you can get chapters 1 through 3, the better. Another important point is that you want to make sure that grammar and spelling are complete and well looked at. So if you need to hire an editor, I'd hire an editor. If you know an editor, get an editor to look at it. Grammarly is required. You chair, your committee, the methodologist, no one should have to read a bad document. So going through it with Grammarly will at least get you the basics of spelling, some use of words that are sentences that are too wordy. It can find all kinds of errors. It's really not expensive to subscribe to the full version. And I would say for your dissertation, you want to subscribe to the full version because it does have a dissertation setting. So you can set it for a dissertation and it will look at things. The one thing Grammarly will do is point out passive tense sentences. You can ignore that because within a literature review, especially anytime you're writing in third person, though, in general, you will not have a lot of active sentences. You're going to have a lot more passive sentences because you're writing in third person. So you can ignore that particular item. But it will come up and give you lots of recommendations, and you want to consider each one. I know for a full dissertation, you can get 900 things that pop up through Grammarly. Not all of them need to be addressed. You can just ignore many of them, but some of them are important and will help you to figure out basic spelling and grammar mistakes that you're making. And that's part of the completeness that I'm talking about, because it will make your final approval for your final dissertation so much quicker and easier because you've passed through that one step. And I can promise you that you don't want to be going back and forth over and over again. Chapters 1 through 3 will be your proposal. They will be approved by your chair, your committee, and a methodologist. So you will have 4 sets of eyes looking at it. So make sure when you turn it in, the final version that you want to be approved, that it is as complete and as perfect as you can make it. Once you complete chapters 4 and 5, you will go back in and make chapters 1 and 3 past tense. We'll talk more about that. So chapter 1 is the introduction to the study. It's basically your prospectus. Chapter 1 will have all the same parts that your prospectus did. It will just be written in paragraph form. It will be more complete. It will have transitions. It will look like a well-written document, but it is an overview. Chapters 1 and 3 will have first person when you talk about methodology. You want to use it sparingly, but you can use first person. Do not use the author, the researcher, anything like that. APA does not want you to use third person when you're talking about methodology. So that's part of the new APA 7 manual. So you can use first person, just don't beat us over the head with first person. Where it's applicable, use it. Where you can talk about an activity without having a person doing that activity, then you can just not include first person. And that's you want to mix that in. So you can say, I'm going to interview 25 people. Those interviews will be recorded and will be coded. You don't have to say, I will interview 25 people, then I will record those recordings, and then I will code. You just don't want to hit us over the head with I. You can just basically start it that you're going to be the one doing it and then talk about what will be done. I would recommend that chapter 1 could come from your prospectus. So it will be basically an outline that you'll use when writing chapters 2 and 3. However, once you write 2 and 3, you will come back to chapter 1 and make sure everything is in agreement. Because as you're writing chapter 3, you may change some of your methodology. As you're developing chapter 2, you may expand the literature and not use some of the literature that you had in your prospectus. So remember, chapter 1 really is what's written last, because it is an overview of chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2 is your literature review. It needs to be comprehensive. It needs to include foundational work. And you're going to need to read a lot of articles to prepare for the literature review. 100+ articles at least you're probably going to read, which means you also want to have a citation manager, because you're not going to use all of those articles right now, but you may use them in the future, or your chair may want you to bring in additional information, and you'll already be prepared because you'll most likely have that information if you've been doing a comprehensive search of the literature on your topic. So you're going to be reading a lot of articles, which means you need to learn how to speed read, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in residency. But you're going to want to make sure that you capture the notes from the article, so that you never have to go back and reread the whole article to remind yourself. You'll have those notes in your citation manager. You want to make a clear argument that your research is important. That's what chapter 2 is. It's showing that your research is important and is filling a gap in the literature, a gap in the field that needs to be looked at and examined. You are telling a story with your literature review. That means there needs to be transitional sentences, there needs to be topic statements, it needs to flow. Traditionally, a dissertation is thematic, which means when we talk about the 3 circles overlapping in your Venn diagram, those are the 3 main themes that you're looking at in your literature. So you organize the literature review by those themes and make sure you cover each theme completely and then move on to the next one. When I read through a literature review, I need to follow what's going on. I need to, number one, be able to read the first sentence of every paragraph and get a general idea of exactly what you're saying. I need the story to move through at what is a logical flow. And what that means is, I don't want you to talk about green eggs in one paragraph, then switch to blue ham in another paragraph, and then go to red beans, and then go back to green sausage, and etc., etc. If you're going to talk about green eggs, then the next paragraph should be green sausage, because you're talking about green foods. Those are the flow. Then flow into the blue foods, then flow into the red foods. You don't want to be jumping back and forth. And here's a blind spot that a lot of students have, and that is you know what you're talking about. So for you, it may make some kind of sense that you would say what you say where you're saying it. However, sometimes in the editing process, when you're moving things around, paragraphs get confused, or they get put into different places, and you don't fix the flow. Remember, it has to flow. I want to see the ideas flow. And again, it must illustrate that there's a gap in the research and a problem in the field. So basically, your problem needs to be supported by what you're putting into your literature review. Also, the literature review must contain all the information you're going to use when you analyze your data. So chapter 4 is going to present, we're going to talk about that later. Chapter 4 presents your results. Chapter 5 is where you discuss those results using the literature from chapter 2. So chapter 2 must contain all the literature you think you're going to use for chapter 5. That's why it has to be so comprehensive. Chapter 3 is your methodology. It must be complete. It's a recipe. It must explain exactly what you will do and how you will do it. Has to be clear. Somebody else has to be able to follow it. Your IRB will come from chapter 3, so you can't be changing chapter 3 once you've submitted it, once it's been approved, because it's got to go to IRB, and IRB approves your methodology, and if you deviate from that, you're going to have to get new IRB approval. And so that leads into making sure that in chapter 3 you give yourself wiggle room and you have backup plans. So that way, if something happens, you can have a backup. What I mean for that is you don't say, I'm going to interview 10 people. You say, I'm going to interview 10 to 15 or 15 to 20 or 10 to 20 to give yourself enough room that if you can't recruit enough participants, that you will have other options. The same is true for recruitment, is you should have several different plans or ideas about what you will do to recruit participants. What happens, you're going to interview 5 teachers from school A, but school A, none of the teachers want to be interviewed. So what's your backup plan? If you're now going to go to another school, that's not what IRB approved, so you're going to have to go back to IRB again. However, if you say, I will interview 5 teachers from A, but if I do not get enough participants, then I will go to school B, and if not there, school C. Example of this is I will use XY listserv. Well, that's not really good, because what if that listserv goes down? What if it won't let you have access to it? What if something happens? It's better to say I will use a national listserv for teachers. Okay, but that's a bit vague and not necessarily a recipe that people can follow. So the best option is to say, if available, I will use XY listserv. But if not, if that's not an option, I will find another nationally recognized listserv for teachers. There, now you have a great backup plan built in. So that's what you'll be doing in chapter 3. Once you finish chapters 4 and 5, you will edit chapter 3 to say exactly what you did do. So when you edit chapter 3, after you finish 4 and 5, if you interviewed 11 people, you will say, I interviewed 11 people, because you're going to make it past tense. So I interviewed 11 people. So you won't say 10 to 15 anymore. You'll say, I actually interviewed 11. If you did use XY listserv, and that's the only one you used, you will say, I used XY listserv. So not only will you be making chapter 3 past tense, but you're also going to be making it reflect exactly what you really did. And again, like I said before, you will use first person to talk about your methodology. Just make sure that you do so sparingly. That's it. We'll talk more about this in the live sessions. If you have any questions, though, in the meantime, you're welcome to email me or to hold them for the live session so we can discuss them with everyone. Thanks for listening.